right, so thank you, Prudence. That really was great, and I appreciate it. A little embarrassing, but great. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about Ben Baxt, who's here, which is great. I've been lucky enough to be Ben's partner for a couple of years, and I've been working a couple of years, and Ben's been working for a couple of years, almost over 40 years, and I've been in a firm where the words reuse, recycle, conserve, adaptation have been bantered around all over the place by Ben, Bob Elanius, who's on, where collaboration is very high in what you have to look at, and it's right up there with high level of design and really doing the right thing. And I've been lucky enough to also work with a whole bunch of great people in the office who have come in and have kind of taken all this to the next level. And a lot of them got certified, and the conversations that happen about what you can do better here, what you can do better there. It's been a really, really great place. And that's kind of gone through to our contractors and kind of extended through to kind of the outside world. And that's why Passive House fits so well. It's not just that it kind of fit with the way our firm thinks and so forth about kind of energy efficiency and reusing and adaptive reuse, but it's also the collaborative and community nature that I saw at all the conferences. It just fit really, really well. So so what do? We do a whole bunch of different types of houses. We've done, I guess, about 8 passive houses now certified. We're working on 14 of them now. One of them, Amy, who I think is on as well, is working on. It's a NYC Buildings of Excellence project. It's a cool house, it's a firehouse that we're converting into residential with community facility below. We're working on a carriage house in Brooklyn with Mark. We're working on a ranch house out in Long Island, which is going to be a retrofit of a stick frame, which is our first, which is kind of fun. I like that our first passive house outside of the city it will be stick built. And then we're working on the Highland passive house with Kathy Hobbs, and that's kind of fun because it's upstate and it's a prefab multi-use building, and Chris Corson is going to be providing the panels from EcoCore. So we do a bunch of different projects. We do a lot of historic masonry retrofits, and that's what we're talking about today. That's why this house is up. And we love the houses, and very often people are coming to us just wanting a really great house that will last generations. And they don't know to ask for passive house. They just know that they want a really great house. And so when we describe the attributes, is why we do it. They want those things because they want these houses to last for generations. This particular client came to us wanting a passive house, which makes this presentation that much more fun. And Kevin, who did this initial blower door, would have needed 2 blower doors just to get this house up to speed in terms of being airtight. So again, these are beautiful houses, lots of history, but what are we looking at? What does a leaky house mean? Because I always feel like we talk about it, but what does it really mean? And everybody thinks about the fact that you've got leaky air coming in and out of windows, conditioned air out, bad air in. But you also, especially in townhouses, but even in a 2-story house, or definitely a 3-story house, you've got the stack effect. But it's naturally bringing in bad air or air from the outside. It's not really bad from the outside, but it's going through all these cracks that you'd never put your finger near, that that all these crevices that are leaky, that bugs crawl through. You're getting your fresh air from places you weren't expecting. And that's only exasperated with these exhaust vents. And some of the houses that we've been doing, you've got these monster hoods that are getting all this air out of the house. Well, that fresh air has got to come from somewhere. And you have to ask yourself where. And then this is a beautiful house that we've worked on. You've got some really great things here. People want to live in this house where it's got this gorgeous exterior, but on the interior, it's just not that much fun to live in. It has that like old house smell, which is not healthy, and it's not a good smell. And you can see just in this, you can see you've got the shutter that's been warped for years because of water infiltration. You can see all the water damage from the radiator. I'm pointing like you can see it, but I'll do it with my mouse now. So you've got the radiator pipe that's broken plaster at the top. You can see this really well yellowed foam at the bottom, and it's leaking air. So you've got pipes held up by columns of CMU, pipes that have all sorts of penetrations from the boiler room. God knows what's making it up into the living space. And then when we take the plaster off of these buildings, and this is the building I'm talking about today, you can start to see we did some joist repair. We'll talk about that in a second. But you start to see things that are just kind of interesting, like, although I'm sure the flue next door is not really leaking that much soot into the space, it's leaking some soot. And you have to kind of ask yourself the question, how much do you really want in your house? And how long has that been happening? And then you can start to see I've got cracks down here as well. This is where we're getting some fresh air as well when you turn that exhaust fan on. There's nothing wrong with this. It's structurally sound, but you've got cracks in all these joists. And we have a responsibility. And it's one of the things that Ben has kind of really emphasized in the office. I mean, for years and years, and Passive House fits it well. We have a responsibility to fix this stuff. We're going to be the last ones touching this if we do our job well for 100 years. And how do you increase that shelf life? Same wall with the plaster recently removed, you've got air coming through all these cracks. I mean, all these cracks. So it really provides an issue. It provides a health issue. So why are my windows drafty? We're always asked this question. It's because behind that panel, I've got that brick. And you can see we started to repair this, but these bricks are coming out by hand. The air is just coming right through. It's not better on the side of the window. And it's not better at the top of the window where I even have a cracked lintel. This is pretty typical. Very often the windows themselves aren't great, but it's the area around the window that's also not great. So this talks a little bit about, and I promise everybody I'm going to spend 2 slides on this. I condensed it because I talk about this too much, but it's just talking about Passive House in a different way. It's really talking about it for the health benefits. I don't even like mentioning the word Passive House. It's just not useful. Next question, and Owen, who's also on, EOIN, Owen. Owen didn't do a Passive House before this. I didn't do a Passive House before this. I never heard, well, not this house, but I heard about Passive House for the first time at some point. But Owen built beautiful homes. Owen was a great carpenter. We knew Owen could do it, and we didn't want to find another contractor to do one of the Passive Houses. So Owen's first Passive House just happened to be the first Passive House in a landmark district. And we had a great team. Kevin was on it. Sam McAfee, who's on this, was the Passive House consultant. Bob DeVillio was the mechanical engineer. Amy, who's now a principal, was the architect in this project. And this was a great project for lots of reasons. It was fun. We learned a lot. It's where we started to do our systematic approach to Passive House, where we could really get to do these things right. And it's where we started the first contractor collective, which I've talked about forever. And this was the first project that we did it on. And Owen was the first contractor who let it happen. And ever since then, we've had so many other contractor collectives. There's some familiar young faces here, by the way, with big beards. And we've done some more. This is a Zola contractor collective where we did window installs. This is not a contractor collective. This is just a big open house. And we've done more after that. This is a repeatable approach. These contractors didn't want to come into that collective meeting at the beginning, but at the end, I mean, they love them. They miss them. If we don't hold one in 6 months, they all want to know, when's the next one. This particular one, half of these contractors have done them, but 3 or 4 of them hadn't. And it was really helpful for them. They can see it. And all of a sudden, it's not a scary thing anymore. So Owen was the first one to let that happen. Then we've got this cool certified project he did in Manhattan with us, where we did a lot of restoration of the front facade. Mark from our office was the project manager on this. And then we've got this project with this team. And just to spend a little bit minute while you look at their faces. The interesting part about this project is I got an email last Friday about the fact with John telling us that, hey, congratulations, you guys hit 0.5. You're going to be a Passive Plus house, which is great because I think it may be the first one in a landmark district. But that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is we passed a test on Tuesday. And on Monday, they had like a 0.6 something, but Owen's like, no, this is a 0.5 house. So he asked John to come back with the blower door, and apparently there was a door open or something like that, or there was I think a trap open. And again, it was a 0.5 house, but there's no pizza party. I like pizza. There was no beer. I wasn't invited to that. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know until 4 days later because that was just a Tuesday. That's what Owen does. Now Owen does passive houses. He does them a lot. He doesn't need a lot of hand holding. We're not really policing him. And so he's gone from a contractor who didn't do a lot of passive houses to right now, yeah, 0.5 was just no big deal. Same with Frankie, who ran this one. He's done 2 or 3. Jenny, who's on it. Bob DeVillio, Kevin did the blown in. I mean, this is just what they've done. So you've got a team who hasn't done a lot of them, and now it's just not a big deal. So it really, for me, it really solidifies that question. I used to say, no, you don't need it. And I wasn't 100% sure, but now you can just see the transformation 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden they're doing passive house, no problem. This is the house, as we look at it, back facade, front facade. Back was already stucco. It's stucco again in the back. Front had gorgeous brick, already had a great cornice. Had to have some restoration work done. But let's start at the bottom. So at the bottom, you've got a new concrete slab that's lowered by about 3 feet. So you can see we've got the bench here. We've got gravel, and we've got 2 layers of insulation, then our Stego wrap, and then our concrete. Now we have Glavel, which basically takes the place of both of these and takes the foam out, which is great. But this is a cool thing to talk about, like sequence, and just really taking the sequence to heart. So you see this red line right here, and you can kind of see the detail here where you've got that layer right there. Well, here's that same red line, and you can see how Owen made sure he had that tape mark right, made sure that he could wrap this up. Then you've got your rock wool, you've got your purple board that continues through. We're not quite done with this yet. This is where we're going to do our pizza and beer party to satisfy my needs there. And it'll be a beautiful bar. You won't be able to see anything. There's nothing here that says passive house. Absolutely not one thing. But it's below there. It's under there. And it's going to be a wonderful, warm, dry, comfortable space. So coming through, there's really good lessons we've learned. And again, I have to thank Owen and a whole bunch of other people, Sam and Kramer and John and Ed. We've dealt with a lot of annoying issues, ghosts that you're just finding forever. And one of them is the annoying box beam, where you've got these seams at the top and bottom. And then there's just simple solutions that we can just share, where you've got Owen puts this plywood on the end, he wraps it with the building wrap, the self stick, preps the pocket, and then it really it allows the stow to stick to it well, but also you're not getting that mysterious flow of air coming through here. And it works on the regular joist as well. This actually isn't the box beam. I didn't have a close picture of that, but it really works well. You wrap these, it works well with the stow. You can kind of see they've got the rapid seal there. We've used a bunch of the liquid apply products. Owen really loves the stow. I can say the liquid applied products has made a huge, huge difference to our projects. Coming into that front wall, and just to kind of continue with just thinking about sequencing, putting this strap on and prepping before you do it means that I'm not going to worry about, and this is helping to hold back this front wall in ways where I don't have to take that front wall down, and I can save it there for generations. And then prepping it even more, you can kind of see the stow on top of that, and you can start to see the plywood at the front. Owen really likes to use plywood. We use some of the intelligent membranes on a bunch of our other projects. We don't tell the contractors what to use. They all have their favorites. Owen likes plywood. He can talk to you about why after this. He's going to be on. He's already on. But you can see the nice clean corner, and you can see the amount of time that you really spend in the corners. It's belt and suspenders and maybe an extra belt, because they're never going to be able to get into that corner again. Once you start to put this framing in, it's difficult to get to. You could start to see a bunch of other cool things here. Nobody's going to penetrate that air barrier except for Kevin. You can start to see his holes here for his cellulose. You can see the service cavity where that's been created, where you can do both your typical electric, you can do your low voltage. It's a great place to run things, and it really simplifies things quite a bit. Talking a little bit about windows, which you kind of got a picture of there. This is another huge element, and Cory Herrala from Landmarks is going to speak after I'm done. And it's huge. There are hurdles that we can't get past without having partners in crime like in crime is like a bad word, having partners like Landmarks. New York City Landmarks has been great. Getting these simulated double hungs, this happens to be a Zola simulated double hung, but getting these simulated double hungs approved, we used to have to do it at public hearing. Now we can do it at staff level, and having them really work with us and these European manufacturers to get these rails and stiles small enough and these mullions to work well enough where we can get these approved is the difference between a client saying yes to Passive House and no to Passive House. If I can't get my Passive House windows approved to Landmarks, I'm not doing a Passive House. And it's that snowball effect that just goes backwards. So it's really nice to get these approved, and you can start to see the installation of these. I could spend a lot of time on this. We debate these continuously, but you can start to see the detail where we've got our stud that allows for continuous installation. There are 2 or 3 moments where this is blocked in and you've got the direct connection, but for the most part, it's fully insulated. You can start to see the top. Again, there is a block in the center. You can start to see that window installed. Sometimes we do the shade pocket at the top, sometimes we don't. You can start to see here's that wall framed. In fact, actually, this picture, and we modify this so much in the debates and the amount of time that the people in our office and the contractor spend kind of working these things out. It's kind of fun and it's interesting. But now we've moved this stud further in to the space. So as you can see, the plywood could just pass right through this. We're always going to have a situation where our brick's going to be able to sit up against that brick. So we have a little bit of space in here so that plywood can fly right through. So just moving that stud out an inch or two has just kind of made yet one more subtle change to what is a really difficult thermal bridge problem in all of these houses. John is going to talk in the after hours. I think John's presentation is totally worth staying for. But this is how John and Ed from Building Type start to look at things, and they're really helpful. We include them from the beginning. I'll say this a little bit more later, but actually, I'm just going to save it for later. Let's talk about Passive House consultants later. But the one thing I will say here, they de-risk this issue. Having this go through your Passive House planning packages and having this tested and seeing where they think the moisture might go or might not go and how much to insulate and how much not to insulate, it de-risks it for the architect. And we'll talk more about that when they come on. You can start to see the installation of these windows. You can see the finish. You can start to see the tape work over here, which is really nice, clean, and little details that I love, like someone thought to, you can see here's that box beam, but these 2 joists, as well as the front joist, they're all shallower. That's because this front wall is also being tied back. You can see the plywood that's attaching this way. I'm removing that or reducing that thermal bridge. And you can start to see that this thin piece of taped up insulation, you can actually kind of see it on the side as well, where they're trying to reduce that thermal bridge yet again. We've got the rock wool here too, which we use everywhere. I mean, we're using it because it's helpful as, you know, as a house kind of moves in, but it's also just great for sound attenuation. You can see the front joist remove off of that front wall with the rigid insulation, nice and clean. You can start to see the ERV tubes. And again, that corner detail, never going to get to that corner again. So prepping it the first time is really important. And again, any contractor who you're working with, I'll go to the next slide, who can start to really work with you. You can kind of see here in this slide, we're all working out kind of 6 different ways that we want this to attach. And any contractor who has the ability to kind of work out these details and build these sculptural stairs, they could do Passive House no problem. They'll learn Passive House quickly. So, and you can start to see here, you've got that service cavity hitting the side wall. You can start to see they've got plywood attached to the wall and then the stud attached to that, kind of removing that thermal bridge again. You can start to see the penetration for a light fixture outside and this really cool product. I believe this is from 475. Can't remember who sells it or who makes it, but there's a few products out there who do this now. Really nice solutions to what could have been difficult problems. And then kind of working all this out and testing it before the sheetrock goes on is pretty important. The blower door is really quite the important tool on all of our projects. And then getting to the end, which is nice for you guys, sorry, but talking a little bit longer than expected, but we've got our roof. We're up at the roof and we do go to wood joists at the roof where we can. trying to reduce that thermal bridge. We do insulate. This is another great place where it's good to have passive house consultants. I'm like, yeah, let's do like 50 inches of insulation on the roof. And, John and Ed are like, no, let's check to see where the dew point is. And, they're putting it through the program. They're telling us where it should be. So we're doing 4 inches on the outside and we're doing the rest inside. And it's just helpful. And again, it's worked out. It's tested. It's in the model. It's de-risking that issue. And very often when we're starting these jobs, the roof is not in great shape. A lot of times they have asbestos on it. You remove that asbestos from the parapet, it's ripping brick off. So having really being able to repair this and then put that rigid insulation on before you get the roof, the clean roof on is really, really helpful. This is a Passive Plus house. It's also an all electric house. These products work really, really well. This is for another presentation as well. But besides the fact that this Fisher-Paykel induction range wasn't out when I did my house, we have all these in our house. We've had them for 4 years. They work out really well. This Whirlpool dryer is yet one more example. We have clients who, if they couldn't get a full-size dryer, they might not do a house that didn't have gas. But this a gas Whirlpool and that heat pump Whirlpool are the same size. Takes a little longer to do the clothes in the Whirlpool, but it's a big difference. You've got the Zender ERV, the Mitsubishi, so it's an all-electric house, which is really, really helpful. Getting that skylight, getting that natural light down. This is a 5 foot by 5 foot Lamelux skylight. This is when the architect is not on site. They're incredibly heavy, but they're single pieces that go down. They're already flashed. They're already worked out. They're really nice skylights. This one happens to be, the shade is on the interior. We've done exterior shades. They get kind of dirty in New York pretty easily. And so you have some serviceability issues, but this is a nice interior shade. You can kind of see there are no lights on when we're doing this. So, and it was kind of cloudy that day. You'll see it in the next photo, and it just lets light in. So again, daylighting, reducing your electrical load. These are things you don't forget about when you're doing the passive house. They're just, you're building the better box and you're thinking about those items. Passive house skylight hatch, kind of fun, always good to have. And then solar. So you can see it was a cloudy day and it was still sunny inside. These photos were taken at the same time because we haven't had a chance to professionally photograph it. And John, maybe you can talk a little bit about the diagram on the right, but before we get there, this is how we kind of maximize the solar on this roof. Fire department kind of requires a very specific access points around skylights and clear paths, which tells you kind of the maximized amount. In this particular case, we were able to get them nice and low. You can't see them from the street, which is nice. But that is what results in being able to get to a Passive Plus. And maybe you can talk just for a couple of minutes about that, or a minute or so before that I introduce Cory from Landmarks.
Sure. Yeah. I just the house is going for Passive House Plus certification, which means that it has very low energy demand, meaning it uses very little energy every year, and it also has some amount of energy production on site. So, in order to meet the Passive House Plus criteria, you can kind of see that green line that goes flat and then 45 degrees and then up. We have to sort of get into the left side of that, onto the left side of that green line. And we do that by both reducing the amount of primary energy, and that's maybe too much to go into right now what primary energy is exactly, but let's just say it's the amount of energy the building uses in the year. And by reducing that and also providing some on-site renewable energy production. And so that's, we make it with this one, despite the rather small solar array. And we can only fit as much solar as we can fit based on code requirements and things like that. But that's in part because we've done such a good job of reducing the energy demand of the house. We've really clamped it down so that we can get into that sweet spot of the Passive House Plus.
Thanks, John. So John's going to talk again in the after hours. It's a good presentation. It starts to talk a little bit about working with Passive House consultants and how we've been working with them and how John likes to work, and it's really, really helpful. But for now, I'd like to also say thank you to the folks in New York City. We've got NYSERDA here in New York State. We've got the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, the DOB, who's been really helpful. And then Landmarks Preservation Commission, and Cory's going to come on next, who's really been, I mean, just incredibly helpful. Again, I cannot tell you enough about the hurdle that would not be able to be overcome if Landmarks wasn't helping us get this through and helping us work out these details of how you could do it.